one, it says each represents, there's a table, each represents a relation. What is the domain? What does the domain cover? The x's or the y's? The x's, good. Okay, so the domain does our x's and the range covers the y's. Okay, so these are all the domain, these are all the range. There was one rule with these yesterday though. What was it?
Oh, you can't repeat the same number.
You can't repeat the same number on the same line. So the domain is going to be -6, -2, -1, and 5. So even though we have two negative ones, we don't repeat them. We only write them down one time. The range then is 1, 3, 7, -5, and 6. Can you have a repeat? Can you have a 5 and a 5 here? Is that allowed? Somebody? Can we have a 5 up here and a 5 down here? Is that allowed? Yeah. We just can't have them on the same line that way. Okay. Okay, number 3, the domain. The domain is going to be -5, -1, 2, and 4. What's the range? 5? -5? Good. And 3. Okay, number 5. Okay, each set of ordered pairs represents a relation. Okay, the domain, which one of these is the domain? Comes first or the range?
First.
Yeah, the domain. This is the D and this is the R, or this is the X and this is the Y. Okay, so the domain is going to be all these first pieces. So -7, -4, -1, 5, and 7. Did you will? The range then is going to be 2, -1, 3, 5, and -3. Okay, 7. The domain is going to be -6. I said -6, but that's already on our list. -3, -1, and 3. Okay, the range is going to be 6, -5, 7, 0, and -4. Number 9. Okay, so we're still doing the domain and range. Okay, so for the domain, am I tracing the line up and down or left and right? Up and down. Okay, so the domain covers the X line, so we need to see anything that's like kind of on this X line. Okay, so we could start here and say, okay, well, there's a point on this part, so that's -7. What else? What's another one? -4, good. Okay. What else? 4. Okay, now, there are 2 4s, so again, we only need 1. And what else? 7. Okay, so that is gonna be the domain. The range then, which way do you think you go? Left and right. Okay, so we start tracking it over. So this one's at 7. Then what?
5. Wait, no. 3.
3, good. Negative 2.
-4.
Negative 4.
-7. I'm at, yeah.
Yep, and negative 7. Okay, the other way that you can do this, and some of you guys might have already, you can take these and draw like this. Go down and then go over. Go down and then go over. Okay? And then we kind of just look and see, okay, well, where is it touching the X line everywhere? And where is it touching the Y line everywhere? Okay? And so that's another way to do it. Okay, and we can do that on this one, but so the domain and the range. So, but what I'm saying is if you draw these and connect them all, okay, now we can very easily see what's all touching the X's. Well, I got a 7, a 2, a 1, 7, 2, 1, negative 3, and negative 6. Okay, what about the Y's? Okay, so here's my Y line, so we're gonna go and see where it's touching purple everywhere. And where is that?
So what?
Where's it? Where's the range? What's 7 is one of them. So I can see here that it's touching the Y line at 7. Where else? Negative 6, so right here. Where else is it touching this Y line? Negative 3. There's one more. And 4. Okay, so that's also a way to do it, or you can do them piece by piece. It's totally fine. Okay, if you're like, what the heck is she doing? Okay, then don't do it that way. Okay, number 13. There is a rule with these. What is it? It has to have the arrow in order for us to write it down. So I can see here that this has an arrow leading from it. So does the 1, so does the 4, so does the 7. This one that has 2 coming from it, that means that 1 was repeated. But notice how they only wrote it down 1 time. Okay? The domain is going to be negative 4. 1, even though there's 2 arrows coming from it, we only write it down 1 time. Okay, 4 and 7. The range, we just needed to double check. This one has an arrow, this has got an arrow, arrow. Okay, if the 3 was up there and he doesn't have no arrow, then we can't write it down. Okay, that means nothing goes to the 3. So it's kind of just on the list. Okay, for nothing. Negative 7, negative 3, 2, 3, and 6. Okay, 15. The domain. What's the domain?
-7.
Good?
-4.
Good?
-1. 4, 6.
Perfect. Okay, and the range is going to be negative 4, 2, 4, and 7. Okay, and same thing. This 4 has 2 of them. That means really the list should be like 4, 4. Okay, but we don't write it twice, just like what you did on the front. Okay, it's not allowed, so that's why they left it out. Okay, 17, yeah. Okay, so I don't have the picture, obviously, because I drew it on your paper and then made copies, but, okay, so if we're looking at this, hours worked versus our paycheck, which one is independent, which one depends on the other one? Hours is independent, right? So I can either show up for work or not, right? But the more I work, what do you think should happen to your paycheck? You should get a bigger paycheck. The more you work, the more hours you work, the more paycheck it is. So independent is going to be my hours. My dependent is going to be my pay, or you can write paycheck. Okay, describe what happens in the graph. Now, this is where you actually need to look at the graph, okay? And I'm going to draw the graph up here just so we can talk about it. Okay, now, take a second, look at me. Otherwise, you guys are not going to know how to read the graphs. Okay, no matter what, right here at this corner, this is always 0. Okay, now, the axis can change, but overall, if this is 0, look at me, then this has to be going up, yes? There's nowhere to go. Can you work negative hours? No, you can't. Okay, so you can pretend that this is anything. You could say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. You could say 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. Okay, but it's always increasing. This side is always going up as well. And so it's just a matter of reading the graph, okay? So if this was 1 hour and you could pretend you got $10, well, if this is 2 hours, I should have $20, okay? And so when we're describing what's happening in the graph, and this is very important, this one right here is always increasing, okay? Now, if my picture is going down, this is still increasing, but this side is getting less and less, okay? So my X value is always going to be increasing, okay? So it's always going to be the more, okay? And this is what your sentence should look something like. The more, okay? And the more is important because this is only going up. The more, whatever is on my x-axis, which in this case happens to be what? What's on my x-axis? Hours. Okay, the more hours, and then this word. Is it going to be more or less my paycheck? The more my paycheck. Okay, and I'm not an English teacher. I don't care about your spelling. Okay, but this is the way all of your sentences should look. The more x-axis, okay, the more or less y-axis. Okay, it's always going to be the more x, and this one is an option, or the more x and y. Okay, more or less x and y. Okay, so let's look at 19. Okay, let's read it. We got minutes and words typed. Okay, which one is independent? Minutes. And just so you know, time is always independent. Time's always moving. No matter what's going on in the world, right? It's always going to be tomorrow. It's always going to be 60 minutes in an hour. It's always going to be Thursday, and then Friday, and then Saturday, and then Sunday. No matter what's going on in the world, time is always going to be independent. Okay? Okay, so independent is going to be our time. Dependent is going to be what? Words typed. Now, and if we think about that, okay, am I going to type more words as time goes on, or am I going to type less? I can type more, okay? If you only have 10 seconds to type as many words as possible, and I have 100 minutes, who do you think is going to type more words? I should be able to. I have more time than you do. Okay, so describe what happens in the graph. Okay, so the more time, and this is not a proper sentence, but just so we can keep the vocabulary correct. The more time, okay, that's more x-axis. What's going on with the y-axis? Is our graph going up or is it going down? It's going up, so then it's going to be the more whatever is on the y-axis. So in this case, it's going to be words typed. Okay. We got time spent studying and a grade on an exam. Okay, which one is independent? Huh? Time. Always, it's always time. If you see the word time, no, that's independent. Okay? So, our independent is going to be our studying. Okay, or your time. The dependent, then, is going to be your grade. Okay, now, let's look at what's happening with the graph. Now, so there are dots, yeah? Okay, you're looking at where the majority of the dots connect. Okay? Are the majority of the dots going up or down? They're going up, right? So we could, you just played connect the dots before, right? You could play connect the dots with this. Overall, okay, the more you study, okay, so if this guy, he studied for 10 seconds, what grade do you think he's going to get? A good grade or a bad grade? Probably bad grade if you only studied for 10 seconds. If you study for 10 hours, what grade do you think you're going to get? A good grade. Okay, and that's typically how it works. Now, see this dot right here? That's somebody who barely studied but still got a very high grade. Is that true? It can happen, right? Some people don't need to study. Here, this guy, he studied a little or a lot?
A lot.
A lot. Did he get a very high grade or a very low grade?
Low.
A very low grade, which does happen in school, right? So some people don't need to study, some people do got to study. Okay, so describe what's happening in the graph. The more, and we're doing our x-axis, the more study, are we going to say more or less for our y-axis? Bless you. Less? Yep, so we're going up. So the more grade. Now, is this a good sentence? The more study, the more grade? No. Okay? But, again, that's just to get you guys in the habit of, it's simple, more or less. Okay? Okay, 23. Cigarettes smoked per day versus your life expectancy. Okay, which one is independent? Cigarette smoked is independent, right? So depending on whether I choose to smoke or not, it depends on, okay, how long I'm probably going to live. Okay, so my independent is going to be the cigarettes. My dependent is going to be my life. Okay, now describe what's happening in the graph. Okay, my x-axis is going up. Okay, so the more smoking, we'll say, really it should be cigarette smoking per day. Okay, what's happening with our life expectancy? It's going down, right? So the less life. Okay, and again, that's not a good sentence, but okay, 25. We got distance, so how many miles I drive or how far I drive, versus the fuel that I use. Which one is independent? The distance is independent, okay? I don't have to drive, I choose to, okay? And the amount of fuel that I use, I'm not going to use any fuel if my car is just sitting in the driveway, okay? So this is my distance, and this is my gas. Describe what's happening in the graph. So the more I travel, right, the more distance, the more I drive, okay, the what? What's going to happen to my gas? The more I drive, what's going to happen to my gas? The less fuel I'm going to have, okay? But you can also do the flip side of that and say the more fuel you use, right? So the less gas. Okay, but we're talking about gas in the tank. So the more I drive, the less gas I have in the tank. Okay, but you could, it's very accurate to say, the more you drive, okay, the more fuel I've used. Okay, last one. Items in our grocery cart. So however many items I have in my grocery cart, is my grocery bill going to be low or high? If I have 500 items in my grocery cart, is my bill going to be really low or high? High, right? What if I only have one item? Low. Okay, now we're not talking like a big screen TV as one item. Okay, but it could be, which is why there's some random dots. Okay, my independent then is what? Yeah, my grocery. Okay, my items in my grocery cart. Okay, because I get to choose how many of those, and that dictates my bill. Okay, and so my dependent is going to be the bill. Okay, describe what's happening in the graph. The more items, what about the grocery? Yep, the higher the bill. And you can say higher, okay? You can say the more bill, okay? We can say the higher the bill, okay? Any of those words work for higher or less.